So athlete-centered, as it would say, isn't 100% driven by the athlete. And that's where I've seen anyway in different environments, school-based physical activity and sport and up to early selection stages, pathway up to Olympic level, where some coaches latched onto the games based approach to make it athlete centered. So we're playing a lot, we're having fun, where decision making is coming from the athlete, we're asking them what they saw. But that has to be combined with the questioning to get to a point where we're not heavily leaning towards one or the other. We're not saying it's all instruction led. Do it this way because I'm coaching for 20 years. This is what I've gained along the way. I may not have anybody challenging me. I may not have anybody supporting me, but I'm going to tell you this is the way to do it.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people.
Coaches, welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Jenny Coe. Jenny has spent 25 years in different sporting roles. Jenny's current role is working as a head of performance and well-being with West Ham Women's Football, a role where she is shifting the mindset in women's football to consider the idea of performance through well-being. She also works with organizations and national governing bodies around the world to identify and grow participation and increase retention in the female workforce and the development of their environments. She is also the co-founder of Impact the Game, a company that supports coaches and athletes in the area of sports psychology and coach development. Impact the Game is an opportunity for all sporting participants to understand the world of sports psychology in an accessible and enjoyable way. In this conversation, we talk about her new book, Myths of Sport Coaching, including myths about questioning, athlete-centered coaching, and fun in sport. As always, if you enjoyed the episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes in this episode or any episode of the podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about the resources we offer coaches, just check out the links in the show details or go to cuttingedgecoach.com. Now to part 2 of my conversation with Jenny. Enjoy the episode.
I think that kind of segues into another myth that is highlighted in the book around questioning. This has become more popularized, I think, probably in the last decade, the importance of asking questions. And I would say, yes, it is important. However, I'm guessing, like you talk about in this chapter, there are some myths around questioning. So will you talk about what the myths are around questioning? How does that play out in our coaching and what do we need to know about it?
Yeah, what a great segue to this chapter. So chapter 14, Mark Partington takes us through this title, Questioning in Coaching Leads to Learning, a deconstruction of questioning. What I love about this chapter is we talked to Mark, we said, listen, your area of expertise and research over a long period of time, what would you like to talk about? And he was like, boom, I got it straight away. Here's some myths that I have been grappling with as a practitioner, have come across in my research. So he breaks the chapter up into 3 sections. Questions what learners in coaching practice naturally leads to learning. So again, we've talked about people who go, if I question, because I heard the questioning is useful, I'll question the athletes, they get it. That's it, job done. I'm a brilliant coach, they're getting it. Until we come to a more kind of challenging representative training session, and sometimes some of the information is lost because we thought it was learned, it was embedded and it's not, or we come to a game and we haven't had a representative practice session, but we did ask questions. So the learning. So he's challenging this idea that if you ask questions to the learners, they learn, full stop. The second one, questions are better than instruction for learning. So I love this section because a lot of people want to go to this dichotomy of it's either instruction or questioning. It's either one or the other. And this is what I'm going to do because I heard it or read it here, because that's the way I like to take my information on as a learner, my learning style. I'm joking. So we've got a really great part of the chapter here that says, instruction has its benefits and its uses here. And let's look at how questions and instructions can marry together for the participant, for the person engaging, so that they can learn and the environment is a an environment that welcomes that type of engagement. And the final part, questioning leads to an athlete-centered approach to coaching. Again, kind of tying the two together, this term of athlete-centered, I've heard it. I've worked as a coach developer across 20 Olympic sports. Coaches told me, I'm an athlete-centered coach. This is our approach. It's autonomy supportive. And then I go into the environment and it looks a little bit different. So then I'm trying to unpick with that coach, is it the understanding of the terminology that's given me this different picture to what you said? Or it's not done on a consistent basis. So then we need to see what barriers you're facing. So questioning part of that says, if I ask a question, I'm being athlete-centered. Again, job done. So they're learning, I'm asking the question, it's their responsibility now. Pick it up and roll with it. So it's 3 brilliant sections there that he looks at. And one of the things that, again, goes back to the last chapter and links into this around the word learning, is we must not forget that there's an emotional attachment to the learning process. So when people are having experiences, it's like dotted over our lifetime where we've had an emotional reaction to something or an emotional engagement. That's where learning can take place as well. It's evoking something in us for us to put a stamp on and go, oh, do you remember that time when this happened? So how can we use questioning in a really nice is a really loose word there, but how can we use questioning in a really productive, inviting, welcoming, not intimidating, athlete-centered way on a regular basis without losing momentum in your session, and understanding what learning means? Who are the people who are responding? What type of question? What kind of demands are you putting on them? How are you holding the silence? When are you asking the question? Etc., etc.
Yeah, that's really good. I really like those 3 sections that you mentioned there. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of them. And then after that, I actually want you to talk about athlete centered a little bit more. You've talked about it a couple times, and I want you to help coaches kind of come to a definition of what that actually is. But first, questioning. I love that first one. Questioning naturally leads to learning. Huge myth. It doesn't. It doesn't. Skilled questioning can definitely lead to learning. And, one of the people who's been really helpful for me in improving my question, especially in the sport context, is Doug Lemov in his book, The Coach's Guide to Teaching. And the stuff that he talks about as far as questioning, and 3 of the massive ones for me around questioning that I try to do. And the first one I don't do very well yet. And as you be I think that coaches often have a lot of background knowledge around their sport, and so sometimes they can get away with not doing this, but I think it's definitely beneficial to doing it, is planning your questions. Like on your practice plan, actually writing out, these are the questions I'm going to ask. The second thing is clear, Doug calls them MOPS, means of participation. So if we don't give them a clear way to participate and respond to the question, we have no way of guaranteeing that they're actually considering the question and thinking about it, that everyone is, because we've all been in part of a classroom or a team where a question's answered and the same 2 or 3 people answer the questions all the time. And the rest of the 15 or 20 probably didn't even consider it because they knew Johnny and Jimmy were going to answer. And they didn't have to retrieve anything from their long-term memory. So it really wasn't beneficial for their learning or memory or retention. And then the third one is wait time. And this is something that teachers are bad at, coaches are bad at. I'm still not incredible at it yet. When we ask a question, we actually wait. We give time for people to think about an answer before they share it in the way that we've asked them to. So, hey, I'm going to call on you randomly. You're going to turn and talk to a peer here. We must ask the question and give wait time. Ask the question, pause longer, and then have them share their answers. And again, making sure that the means of participation ensure that everyone's going to consider and answer. So either, hey, you're going to talk to a peer about it, think about it for 10 seconds, then share your thoughts with your peer, or I'm going to call on you randomly here. Don't shout an answer. Think about it for 10 seconds, and then I'm going to call on 3 people here. Right now, all of a sudden, everyone's going to have to mentally engage with that question. It's just massively different from questions that we kind of default to asking. What should we do here? What's this called? Like, we've got to become skilled with our questions if we want it to lead to learning. So I love that section that he hit there. Any thoughts to what I just shared there?
Yeah, I'm smiling along here because you've really seamlessly integrated some of the key areas of pedagogy anyway, and for people to even stop and think about the what again, go back to why I'm doing it. Like, what do I want to get out of this session? How have they arrived? What am I noticing about this person that hopefully I've been coaching for quite some time? And is it a recall question where I want to test, show me show me or tell me that you know where I'm at because of what we've been doing. We're doing set plays, we're running through a new uh, defense, we're setting up something on the track or in the pool. Show me, tell me, so I get an idea of where you're at. But actually, how many coaches are thinking about the iterative process of reintroducing or whole part holding, or what way am I delivering the message, and then the skilled questioning playing a vital part to that. So in the summary of this chapter, Mark mentions deliberately planning, as you said there. So there's this need that you think about at this point, and this point, I'm going to ask a question. Or even at West Ham this year, when I had sessions off the pitch and spoke with the coaches and the coaching team about questions on the pitch, we had this awareness that some of the players don't like to answer questions openly. Some of the players don't really know. We've got this year a little bit less than the previous year, 5 or 6 players where English was a second language. So what are we really trying to gain by quick fire round? What's this? You get that? You get it? Are we all on the same page? Yeah. Okay, we're good. Move on. And all of a sudden, only one person's nodding. Everyone else is like, was there a question? Did I miss something? And then we come to match day and people are like, do you go there or do I go here? And another really quick example of this, it's not around question, but it's around the clarity that questioning can bring. The start of the season, we talked about communication, we broke down our words, we looked at familiarity from the coach who was new to the team, what words he was using on a regular basis. We talked about the coaching team. What words would you use because they're not from the same country? What words would you use to describe inside outside? So we get to a point where you have players who've played in 5-6 teams, some a little bit more, and their international commitments where different outcomes they want them to look the same, force them inside, force them outside, but they're using different words. So we get to a point where our coaching staff and all our players are on the same, by questioning, are on the same page to understanding what we want to achieve. Because I've worked with coaches who didn't do that. I've heard stories from different sports of Olympic athletes where their coaching team weren't on the same page, so they're doing a one-to-one. They've just heard something different from another coach. So it's where does coaching take place? Can you deliberately plan? And as you've said, we've reiterated a few times, hold the silence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that was triggered in my mind as you were talking about some of that is just the importance of, of using questioning well to check for understanding. And you were talking about, especially on a team where you have people who the primary language being spoken is not their primary language. I'm coaching an eighth grade team, and I've got several English language learners on my team, and several kids who are like virtually new to basketball. And so the head coach and I, we've talked about, okay, here's the language we want to use. And there were some times in our first week of summer practices a couple weeks ago where we were working on a concept, a defensive concept, and we were using this phrase or language. And one of the athletes, like, he wasn't getting it. And so I just went up and said, do you have any idea what we mean when we say this phrase, when we say the helpline? He was like, no. It's like, okay, good. Like, yeah, like, and we had gone over it as a whole group, but it missed it. It didn't stick with him. And so, and it's easy in those moments to be like, this kid just doesn't get it. This kid isn't trying. It's like, there was just a language barrier there. And yeah, I think it's really important for us to to not assume and ask some curious questions there around, especially when an athlete's struggling with something, not getting it. Hey, explain to me what you think I mean when I say this. Or yeah, and again, to your point, so important that as the coaches, we're using the same language and terminology to avoid that confusion. Because now all of a sudden, if I'm saying helpline and the other coach is saying midline or split line, he's gonna be like, "What? Where the heck are all these different lines?" Because he doesn't know that they're the same thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that was kind of a
Yeah.
tangent, but I think really important again too that we think about questioning of like, okay, use questions to actually figure out some important information. Um, and you've got to have a level of trust and safety with that player. Like he's got to know, like, I'm not trying to get you here. I really want to know, do you understand what we're saying? And he
Yeah.
was like, no, no idea. Um, yeah. So I just think it's so important.
One thing that I think is really interesting in that, though, what you've said there, is that that can also um, stop the evolution of the term uncoachable, or the label of maverick that people so quickly bring into their environment. When I hear the word uncoachable, which I hear on a regular basis, or I hear that the player is lazy, or that they're stupid, or they're silly, or whatever it might be, it just really gives me this reaction inside. I'm like, no, what? Because we haven't taken the time to understand the person. So you obviously have created a space and a comfortable safety level where that player, when you ask the question, could say, no, I don't get it, without a fear of some sort of, oh, they don't think I was listening, I'm going to be benched or whatever. So you got a chance to say, well, who have I got? What has their experience of learning been? What has their day been like? I mentioned about arriving, how they arrived in your environment. So important, and especially in this day and age where you have people in certain education systems that I've operated in the UK and in Ireland, sometimes they won't have heard their name mentioned by anybody during the day until they go to a coaching session, or in a nice way anyway. And that might be the highlight of their day, going to a coaching session. So we've got to think about how they're arriving and how we can maximize that enjoyment and that interest in the sport. Because look at the self-determination theory, a sense of belonging. Can we make them feel that there's a sense of belonging? Autonomy, we talk about athlete centered, we talked about their choosing and navigating their sporting journey or parts of the session. And mastery, can they feel like they have mastered something, or a level of competence has heightened in the session, to motivate them to want to come back and be the best version of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. And back to that example and story I shared, like he started to get better at it right as soon as he understood it too. And
Yeah.
kids love seeing themselves improve. If you want your kids to keep coming back and to ask you, "Oh, is practice over?" at the end of it, like they need to see themselves getting better. It's fun for them, and I mean it's the most fun as a coach too. Like, oh, they're getting better. They're getting better. This
Yeah.
is amazing. So, yeah, I love what you shared there. Let's talk a little bit more about athlete centered, and
Yeah.
maybe there are some myths around this that need to be dispelled. You talked about in that questioning chapter, kind of the myth that questioning means you're an athlete centered coach. Uh, what is an athlete centered coach? How do we know if we are actually an athlete centered coach?
So I think there's some easy entry points to this when we look at understanding who the individuals in front of us are. So athlete centered, as it would say, isn't 100% driven by the athlete. And that's where, I've seen anyway, in different environments, school based physical activity and sport, and up to early selection stages, pathway up to Olympic level, where some coaches latched onto the games based approach to make it athlete centered. So we're playing a lot, we're having fun, where decision making is coming from the athlete, we're asking them what they saw. But that has to be combined with the questioning to get to a point where we're not heavily leaning towards one or the other. We're not saying it's all instruction led. Do it this way because I'm coaching for 20 years. This is what I've gained along the way. I may not have anybody challenging me. I may not have anybody supporting me, but I'm going to tell you this is the way to do it. The game has moved on. The S&C has moved on. And when I say the game, sometimes I'm talking about the adaptation, the rules. Sometimes I'm talking about the athleticism in the game, the style of play, and then the team culture. So we're not looking at conformity driving culture. Owen Eastwood talks a lot about that. Um, or in the culture, we're not talking about everybody must behave the same and look the same. And we want to know about what makes up our team, our group, even if it's an individual sport, our classroom. Who are these people? And can we then look at the difference between enabling and empowering? So, researcher Pale back in 2018 talked about empowerment, athlete learning, and decision making at the crux of player centered approach. So, can I empower them um, instead of enabling them to take the training session, their goals, their communication to the next level? Can I understand learning, what learning to this individual and the environment, what's that kind of relationship look like? And the decision making process, how are they making them? How am I challenging them? What do I notice? So yeah, there's a load of key kind of words that I've dropped in there, but it's thinking if we have any of those or some of those in partnership, and we're thinking about the person in the center and our relationship with them, I think that's a really good starting point around this topic.
Yeah, I love that. Consider the person first. Would you say a little bit more about what you shared there at the end? What's that difference between enabling and empowering? You mentioned that research. How do we know which one we're doing?
Yeah, so um, a good example would be at the start of last season, we have obviously being a professional sport, we've got a lot of staff, really fortunate, amazing facilities. So we go onto the pitch for training and we've got 25 players and we've got 10 staff. We've got some coaching staff, medical staff, S&C, and some interns. We've got goalkeeper coaches. You got myself as head of performance. Sometimes the GM will come out, loads of people around. And we've got a couple of people who get injured. So we're one game's going on, small sided game, somebody goes down, and then we've got somebody else doing a pocket of a session over here. And the difference in both sections, and I was early in the door, it was a habit that had been created. It's kind of this term, this is how we've always done it. So our physio or sports therapist would go over, would have a conversation and do a kind of an initial assessment on what they'd noticed and how the athlete was feeling. So they're asking a question. By the time that player came from the pitch to the sideline, four other adult members of staff, and I say adult, sorry, like the staff rather, four members of staff had either put an arm around to check, are you okay? Can you go on? Is everything all right? And that wasn't that in my mind that was enabling. So I'll get you the exact definitions, but as a practical example, I saw a person going down. I saw a professional who is the most qualified in the space to deal with it, going to deal with it. And then people, are you okay? Everything okay? Do you want to take the rest of the session off? So I thought what we're doing here is we're not providing them the opportunity to assess their own body, their feelings, the situation. Do they need to listen to the advice of what the sports therapist and physio have said, and then make the decision with their advice on where they go next? On the other side of the pitch, with somebody go down, have a kind of emotional reaction to a decision that wasn't made. But what they did was we had one person who asked a question, gave some time to respond. The person got up, they walked to the sideline, they assessed their body. They then thought, I need to have a quick chat with the physio, had a chat with the physio, and said, I'm ready to go on again. So we're empowering that person by asking the question, giving them the space to make the decision, guiding kind of their own level of what's next, feeling confident that they can make those decisions over enabling, where we're crowding in, we're problem solving for them, we're holding their hand, if you like.
Yeah, that's good. And I think there's also just the important point in there of who is the expert on it. Let them deal with it. Like let the physio be the one that makes the determination, or they go talk with them about it. And I know that it depends on your context, and many people listening probably it's like you're the only one in your practice and it's just you, or maybe you and an assistant, and you're not an expert in other fields. And so, but I think that's a good story to kind of illustrate that of, okay, maybe we can all chill a little bit and let them make a decision. Be okay with it. Yeah, I like that you highlighted that. I want to talk about the last topic is myths around fun in sport, and I think this is a good place to end it, especially thinking about athlete centered. Will you talk about that? What are the myths that are kind of adopted around fun in sport? How does that maybe play out in coaching often? And What do we actually need to know about fun in sport?
Well, this is one of my favorite chapters. I hate to say it because there's 20 amazing chapters. Why it is one of my favorite chapters? Because I've heard across all the different age groups at some point from coaches that girls and boys are different when it comes to how you coach them. And my bugbear with that is, yes, absolutely, the physiological changes that happen, menstruation, different reactions in the month, yes, absolutely. And people should be really informed and aware of what the female body is going through in these different stages. Um, but what's not different, and what really bugs me, and what Amanda Vizek and Anna Failer do really well in the chapter on the science of fun and sport, is they've done lots of research with the different groups, and they've come back the same. Try hard, positive team dynamics, positive coaching. That's a 2019 piece of research from Amanda and Vizek, where she's talking about interviewing the boys group. Why do you play? Why do you want to come back and play sport? What is it that's exciting? Oh, I love trying hard. I love being part of a team. I love the reinforcement from the coach and the positivity. The girls said the same. So what she talks about in this chapter, what they talk about, sorry, in this chapter, is how we're so heavily influenced by a number of different streams. If we Google girls in sport, we get the arm around each other. We get the socialization part. They're there because they want to have fun. They don't want to be challenged. We have the boys in sport, the serious face, the striking of the ball, the holding handlebars of the bike. I'm competitive. I'm here to win. And it was only yesterday I saw on the High Performance podcast, Gary Lineker was interviewed, and he said, I didn't like all the training sessions. I wanted to know more of the details of each session, why we were doing what we do. And I just smiled and I was like, woohoo, because you know why? I've heard so many times from guys, from coaches who coach boys or coach men saying, oh, they just get on with it. They don't want all the nitty gritty details. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Read Mark's chapter, ask about questioning, plan it, skilled questioning. Let's see if you ask the questions, do they want to know more? How do you know that their growth and development and understanding of the sport, the technical, the tactical, all the other components won't grow exponentially if they don't have more information about it? Or I know highly competitive female athletes in our environment and a multitude of others, including my own, that are so competitive that don't need to know the nitty gritty details of everything, that just want to get on with it. So this chapter, it kind of has two sides. An excerpt from it, if I may, just very briefly. Regardless of an athlete's age or their athletic prowess, very often they are subjected to sweeping generalities of what is believed to make playing sport fun for them, based none other than their biological sex and gender identity. The binary expectations of what is fun for girls and women in sport and what is fun for boys and men in sport are as categorically different as the meaning attached to pink versus blue. There is just some of the many myth conceptions around fun. So we've got the fun element, we've got our biases that we need to challenge around, coaching boys and girls is different in relation to how they receive information and their engagement, why they're there in the first place, not any different based on the research. So it's a really cool chapter that allows me to have the conversation and say, yeah, absolutely, at certain ages, girls need an awareness. We've had some research around concussion that shows different reactions across boys and girls. So brilliant, we can adhere to those and follow protocols and stuff. But let's not just lump all boys into one and all girls into one. Let's go back and look at the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said there at the end is the key piece, right? Let's look at the individual. And, I love that you highlighted the reality is the research continues to show that what boys and girls find fun about sport is virtually the same. Like I've seen some research where it was their top 10 lists of why they play, and the lists were almost identical. The order was just slightly different by gender sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But the main ones were all there. And yeah, around fun and competitiveness and being part of a team and getting better at their skills, like feeling that confidence. And I think it connects to what you were talking about earlier with self-determination theory. Like they all want those those things in the experience. They all want to see and feel themselves improve. They all want to be in a positive environment. And so I think as coaches, it's so important that we hear that list and recognize, okay, well, these are then the things that I should make a priority in my own coaching. I should make it a priority to create a positive environment. I should make it a priority to uh, provide practices where it is competitive, where they're playing the sport, that we're keeping score, that we're doing what the game is. I should make it a priority to intentionally plan for connections too, that we're creating a team environment where they do feel connected to one another. Like all those things that go into creating this fun experience should be priorities in what we actually do in our coaching. And like you said, coaching boys or girls, it should be the same. So I love that you shared that there. And I think that's a great place to wrap it up. There are obviously 20 myths that you guys cover in the book, and we just scratched the surface of them. So, Jim, before we wrap it up, just share with people where they can get the book, connect with you, learn more about it, anything you want to leave the audience with.
Yeah, for sure. I will say just very briefly, Luke, that if people just rewind and listen to the last 15 seconds of what you've just said, their coaching will be better instantaneously. So it was an incredible summary. And I think people should just pause on that and think, am I doing this? How do I know I'm doing that right? And that would be amazing. So that was really good. I was completely engrossed. So I'm on Twitter, love having a listen, a look, a watch, and following certain people that challenge my way of thinking. So you can get me there at Jenny Coe 10. And then, or email, if we go old school, we connect over the phone, Zoom after that, jennycody@gmail.com. But more importantly, get your hands on the book if you haven't already. It's on Amazon. Myths of Sport Coaching. I think it's £13 on Amazon. Really accessible, really affordable, especially because we've got 32 authors who are working in research or practitioners on the ground, living, breathing the enjoyment of their own myths that they've encountered and a chance to engage. So that's really important for us around the feel of the book, the amount of chapters, 12 countries. So we've got as diverse as we could around these topics. And there is a part 2 coming out next year. Bum, bum, bum. So yeah, that's where you can go. Sequoia is also the website. So if people are part of organizations where they want to buy in bulk, there's massive discounts because we want it to be out in the masses. We want to challenge and improve the world of coaching. So sequoia.com is the website. They're our publishers, and they can give you some deals for your organizations, institutes, universities and stuff.
That's fantastic. Well, Jen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for putting the energy and effort into writing the book, caring about and developing coaches so that they can provide better experiences for their athletes, the kids they lead, the adults they lead, whatever their context is. It's so important and so needed. So I appreciate your time a ton and your work. Thanks for joining me.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and thanks to Jenny for joining me. As always, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast. And coaches, if you enjoyed this episode, would you take a minute to either share a takeaway with us on Twitter or share it with a coaching friend? Those things go a long way in helping us share with more coaches who can then impact more athletes. Thanks for listening to the podcast.